Welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight, the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink, bane of bullies, hero to dogs and small children everywhere. All right, the left-wing mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, met with the president-elect at Trump Tower today. He emerged in a righteous fury, promising to defy the new administration and the entire federal government on the question of immigration. The mayor said he will continue to treat illegal immigrants as American citizens, issuing them government ID cards and shielding them from law enforcement. Maybe not since fellow Democrat George Wallace stood in the schoolhouse door has an elected official issued such a fiery challenge to the feds. Here's part of what de Blasio said today.
That proposal countered and flew in the face of all that was great about New York City, the ultimate city of immigrants, a place that has succeeded because it was open for everyone, a place built of generation after generation of immigrants. And I reiterated to him that this city and so many cities around the country will do all we can to protect our residents and to make sure that families are not torn apart.
Well, joining us now is an ally of Mayor de Blasio. He is New York City Council member Rafael Salamanca, who represents the Bronx. It's great to see you, Mr. Salamanca. So there's something that evokes memories in this, and we saw this in the 1950s and 60s. States and municipalities defied federal law in a bunch of different places, in Little Rock, for example, in Alabama and Mississippi, and the Fed sent troops in, sent tanks in to enforce federal law. How is this different from that?
Well, I don't think the federal government is going to send any tanks or...
But why wouldn't? Why is it different from what happened before?
Well, to be quite frank, I can't explain what happened before, but I can explain what's happening now.
Okay.
ID NYC, it's an ID that the city of New York has, which residents in my district and in the city of New York are taking good advantage of.
Right.
Because of, number one, what it provides. We have I have a lot of my constituents and also residents that live in my community who do not have a form of ID. And therefore, what ID NYC does is that it allows you to have a form of ID should you have any interaction with police officers or intermunicipal.
I understand that, but what the mayor was saying is, look, there are federal laws about who's allowed to be in the country and who's not, and we're ignoring them, and there's nothing you can do about it. Why is that not a violation of the law itself? You're an elected official looking at the federal government and saying, I'm not obeying. Why is that okay?
Well, I don't think that that's what the mayor is saying, that he's not obeying. What the mayor is saying is that he's going to protect residents of the city, in the city of New York. And in the city of New York, we have individuals who are documented and undocumented, and he's looking out for the best interests of the residents.
So New York is a sanctuary city, which means it protects people who are breaking immigration laws, right? There are federal laws, they're being broken, but those people are protected by the city of New York. My question is, once you start deciding we're not recognizing certain laws, why stop with immigration laws? Why wouldn't New York City be a sanctuary city for tax evaders, for example, or people who use heroin? I mean, who decides which laws New Yorkers have to follow and which they don't?
Well, I don't think that that's what the mayor is implying. As I mentioned,
that's what he said.
Well, no, to be quite frank, I don't think that that's what the mayor is implying. What the mayor is implying is that he's looking out for residents in the city of New York. And, you know, his conversation, my understanding and watching the media, and he was very frank and clear to President-elect Trump that he's going to do everything that he can in his power to protect his constituents.
And Trump is saying, I mean, they have a legitimate difference of opinion here, but Trump is saying there's a law that prohibits people who are here illegally from working and continuing to collect benefits. And your mayor and you are saying, no, we're ignoring the law. They're doing something. Or you're not saying that. Do you think the people who are here illegally should face the legal consequences?
No, what I'm saying is that, so the federal government, they're the ones who enforce the law, correct?
That's right.
And the state has to abide by what the federal government has to say. But we also have every right to say, hey, we want to defend our constituents, whether they're documented or undocumented. And this is very clear. The reason that the mayor is being so frank is because of President-elect's stance on immigration and what he plans on doing. And so,
but his stance is not different from what the law currently is under President Obama. He's merely saying, I'm going to enforce the law. And your argument is you shouldn't enforce the law.
No, what
sort of an odd message for an elected official to send.
What his stance is saying is that he's going to go after and he's just going to deport all undocumented immigrants. But there's a repercussion to that. What about families? The families that are here. You're going to break families who are here. And as an elected official, at least me being an elected official in the South Bronx, where I have a high population of individuals who are documented or undocumented, it's my responsibility to protect them all.
But I wonder if you have a responsibility to other people in in this country, like, say, the middle class in New York, which has been shrinking every year since I can remember, they're obviously impacted negatively by illegal immigration because they're paying the bills for people who aren't citizens. Where's the concern for them? I never hear anybody on the left say, what about, like, ordinary people working 2 jobs? You know, they don't have a lot of money. They're paying for the stuff. What about their interests? Are you interested in their interests?
You also have the undocumented who are working 2, 3 jobs as well, and they're also paying taxes as well. You know, so again, I am responsible for the South Bronx, and it's my responsibility to defend the individuals who are living in the South Bronx.
What do you say to people? Because it's not just about the South Bronx. It's about the millions of people who are living here who are not allowed to be here legally. They just came. They're defying the law. They're not interested in obeying the law, apparently. What do you say to the millions and millions and millions of people who are waiting in line in foreign countries to do it the right way? And it's a long process. They're suckers, aren't they? And you're pointing out what suckers they are by helping the people who broke the law.
No. So, well, I'm being quite frank. We also have to understand that these individuals who are undocumented, who are here, you know, they're here because they want to get a better life for themselves.
I get it, but no, I'm talking about other people. What about all the decent people who want to come here to make a better life for themselves, but they can't because they have to follow the laws? What about them? Does this make a mockery of what they're doing?
No, and again, the immigration system is not perfect. It is flawed, and we both know that.
But are you making it better, or are you encouraging people to break the law by giving them sanctuary here?
No, we're not encouraging anyone to break the law.
Really?
No, yeah, really. We're not encouraging anyone to break the law.
But you're saying if you make it to New York, you're all set. You know, no one's gonna come grab you because we're going to protect you. If I'm in a foreign country, and if it's a choice between waiting in line for 3 years to get a visa or just like showing up illegally and getting to New York, why wouldn't I choose the latter?
No. Well, again, that's a conversation that we all need to have because our immigration system is flawed, and we know that. What I am advocating is for those individuals that are in my council district, and we have a new government. Well, we have a president-elect who's coming in, who's stating that he's going to come in and he is going to deport all of them.
Let me say, we're almost out of time. A sincere question. So you're issuing voter ID cards. You're issuing ID cards. What would prevent a holder of one of those cards from voting? Are you worried about that?
No, because in order for you to vote, you need a social security number. And these ID cards, you don't need a social security number to obtain it.
Should people here illegally be allowed to vote, do you think?
I'm sorry?
Should people here illegally be allowed to vote?
No. You
don't think they should?
No.
So if a vote came up and that was the question, should we allow them to vote, you would vote no?
No, exactly.
Okay, cool, good for you.
Yeah.
City Councilman, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, President-elect Trump spent his day inside his eponymous tower here in New York City's Fifth Avenue with part of his transition team. But about 250 miles to the south, the rest of Team Trump huddled in the Capitol, and Vice President-elect Mike Pence met with his predecessor, Vice President Joe Biden. Fox News correspondent Doug McKelvey is outside Trump Tower in New York with the very latest. Doug, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Tucker. Good to see you. The Trump transition team has been pushing back hard today on the tsunami of reporting that there are great divisions in the upper echelons of the transition team, that the team is disorganized, chaotic, and slow on the uptake. And also there's a transition a policy now of moving forward on this transition team, of fighting back against this. Here's Jason Miller, who is the communications advisor for the transition team.
We're very confident with how things are proceeding, and the president-elect will be putting forward some very fine people. There will be some folks who will be outside the box. There'll be some people who have been very successful in fields of business, in fields of education, a number of different things. There are going to be successes who are ready to bring that same energy to the administration to help the president-elect implement his agenda.
And here's the latest now, Tucker, on some potential key candidates for cabinet positions and otherwise. Jamie Dimon is a name that has surfaced for Treasury Secretary. He is the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase. He said that he is not well suited for the job. That from our sister network, FBN, today. He's described himself as a Democrat, but barely a Democrat, apparently feeling that some people really are smarter, do work harder, and deserve what they earn. Should he not take the job, and not well suited perhaps could mean a reference to his throat cancer bout that he had a few years back, or perhaps that he's been fined by the federal government. There's another name in the mix there. It's Steve Mnuchin, a Goldman Sachs investment banker who made $40 million on Wall Street, later went on to produce Hollywood movies, including the patriotic blockbuster American Sniper. Now for National Security Advisor, a name which has surfaced is Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, former DIA chief. One thing that he faces an advantage here about is that there would be no confirmation for the NSA chief. He could escape Senate Democratic scrutiny then because of some of his social views, social conservative views. Another name now which has surfaced for Secretary of Defense is Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. He is extremely well qualified with a very big brain and broad experience. He was a Harvard Law School student who gave up practice of law to become a platoon leader in Iraq. Bottom line, though, for this transition team, they should be appreciating this kind of controversy and this kind of criticism because it's only going to get worse after Inauguration Day. Tucker?
That's for sure. Doug McKelway, outside the gilded Trump Tower. Great to see you, Doug. Well, it's been 8 days since the election was held, and across the country, dazed college students are finally emerging from their safe zones into the glare of daylight with bullhorns and signs in their hands. At least 80 colleges are now staging anti-Trump protests or walkouts. One of them is at Rutgers, that's the State University of New Jersey. And joining us now, one of the protester organizers, Rutgers students, Alex Uematsu. Alex, it's great to see you tonight. So since you're in college and you're thinking of the big things, the big ideas here, you're upset that there are undocumented students, as you say, on your campus, and you don't think President-elect Trump is sympathetic enough to them. So let's sort of pull back a little bit. Who do you think has a right to come to this country? You apparently assume that these people have a right to be on your campus taking a state-subsidized education. Who has a right to come to the United States?
I believe that everyone should be able to come to the United States. We are always and have been and are still a nation of immigrants, and so I believe that there is no line. We can let in as many people as we choose in terms of policy, and it's there's artificial limits set on who can come in, who can't, from what countries, and from what countries can't,
right,
whether they're skilled or not, and I feel like that is abandoning our heritage as a nation of immigrants.
So anybody who wants to come should come. Now, most of those people who do come, the low-skilled ones, are a net cost to taxpayers. They take more in services than they produce. You know the supply and you know the basic economic laws. So you believe then that taxpayers have a moral obligation to subsidize anybody who wants to come here?
I'm not sure where you're getting those figures from. I've heard different figures.
Okay.
I've heard studies that say that undocumented immigrants actually provide a net benefit to the economy.
Okay.
And a lot of these studies that claim that undocumented immigrants are a drain or taking money away from taxpayers or something like that are using kind of biased statistical
well, you heard
methods
wrong
and
because
things
it's
like
actually
that.
it's not even close between education and infrastructure and healthcare, food subsidies, housing subsidies. It's literally not even close.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, do you consider the effect this has on the rest of the population? You say anybody around the world has a right to come here. You learned that in school and you believe it uncritically. Do you think that everyone else who lives in this country has a right to say, wait a second, we should be able to choose who comes here?
So we shouldn't forget that we're talking about a president-elect
Right.
that has pledged to deport 11 million people from this country. And so that's what I would like to keep the focus on, is the tremendous human rights violation that would entail. A deportation force rounding up people who are undocumented, people who have been here for their entire lives, almost. People, we had a person at our rally today who was, who was brought here at 3 months old. And he's undocumented, but he's an American. He deserves to be here, and I
get it. No, I've heard it before. Alex, do you think people have a right to lock their doors? Or do you think they have an obligation to let anyone in who chooses to come? Well, you're saying that the United States has no right to prevent people who want to come here from coming here. And I'm just asking you, does the same apply to us as individuals? Do you have a right to keep people out who want to share your apartment with you?
I think that's not really a direct analogy. That obviously a nation state, a sovereign nation state, is very different from an individual.
Well, it belongs to its citizens, so they should be able to decide who comes in or out. Wouldn't you agree? Doesn't the country belong to its citizens?
I think that there are certain things.
I think you need to think this through, Alex.
Slavery was a democratic.
Right. Okay. Throw the slavery thing
was a democratic.
Let me just ask you this. I know that you're a liberal, a radical, lefty. I wonder if it ever occurs to you that you're maybe doing the bidding of business when you advocate for low-skilled workers to come here. Why do you think people support a lot of low-skilled labor in this country? Because it lowers wages. It lowers their labor
So-
costs. It makes them more money. Do you realize that you're part of that?
So, the Cosecha movement, which I'm a part of, is a movement fighting for permanent protection, dignity, and respect for all immigrants in the United States. It would be absurd to suggest that we're pro-corporate or we're somehow helping corporations when our strategy is a massive boycott of key industries, as well as a general strike led by undocumented immigrants, regular immigrants and also allies.
Well, then it may surprise you to know that they're fully on your side with bringing the low-wage labor thing, because it benefits them too. So think about that overnight, Alex. It's great to see you. Thanks a lot for coming on.
What we care about is permanent protection, dignity, and respect.
Right.
Thank you.
I'm for that too. Thanks. Well, it's time for tonight's Twitter storm. That is our nightly forecast of social media's most intense weather patterns. Just days after promising to give the newly elected president a fair shake, the New York Times published today an op-ed entitled "Bullying in the Age of Trump." It's an interesting and valid topic, and yet somehow the piece failed to mention bullying and violence against Trump supporters. And of course, there's been a lot of that. Kind of a big omission. Conservatives on Twitter agreed. They started this way. Robert tweeted, "New York Times, sorry, all we did was mindlessly bash Trump. It was crappy journalism." 1 week later, bullying in the age of Trump. Lesson not learned. This tweet came in: "Bullying in the age of Trump equals committing violence against Trump people over unfounded racism and fascism hysteria," and then claiming victimhood. A user called Republic of Trump wrote this: "My children and I were called racist and given the finger for wearing Trump gear, but love Trump's hate, right?" Probably not. General Selleck said, quote, "Bullying in the age of Trump is the media calling Trump supporters uneducated, racist, bigots, homophobes, and misogynists." And finally, Greg said, "Dare you walk around a campus with a Trump hat and see who the bullies are?" Yeah, try that. Don't try that at home, actually. President-elect Trump hoists a finger in the direction of the press as he ditches his entire press pool for a night out in Manhattan. Reporters are up in arms. Does he care? Should we care? Also, rogue electors trying to undo the will of voters and install another president on Inauguration Day. They say it's constitutional, it's plausible, and it's necessary. Two of them join us next. Well, Donald Trump's feud with the New York Times does not seem to be abating any. Mr. Trump has accused that paper of biased reporting, and the Times has basically admitted as much. This morning, Mr. Trump took to the Twitters to continue the fight. This is his first one. "The failing New York Times story is so totally wrong on transition. It is going so smoothly. Also, I have spoken to many foreign leaders." He followed up with this: "I have received and taken calls from many foreign leaders despite what the failing New York Times said. Russia, UK, China, Saudi Arabia, Japan." And finally, he tweeted this: "Australia, New Zealand, and more. I'm always available to them. New York Times is just upset that they look like fools in their coverage of me." Hard to know exactly what he means, but perhaps you can decipher it at home. Mr. Trump's battle with the press appears to go both ways, by the way. Members of his traveling press pool are mad that last night he ditched them to go to dinner at 21 here in Manhattan. It's usually protocol for the traveling press to follow a president or president-elect wherever he goes. Times are definitely changing. Joining us now to chart that change, Steve Hilton. He's CEO of Crowd Pack, and Shelby Holliday, senior video reporter for the Wall Street Journal. It's great to see you both.
Great to be here.
So there's so many levels in this, but this just seems like a harbinger of things to come, Shelby. The New York Times is mad because, he's not following convention, and he hits them by tweet. We're going to see a lot of this, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, all journalists were up in arms last night because he's breaking protocol. He's doing something president-elects normally don't do, which is tell the press they're not moving for the rest of the night and then going out.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of freak out last night. And, you can debate whether or not the press should have been following him. But yes, you're absolutely right. This is setting the tone for the next 4 years. I say, get your popcorn ready because there are going to be a lot of fireworks between Trump and the media in the next 4 years.
There is no doubt. I mean,
he's a 70-year-old man who likes to drive his own narrative,
yes.
Craft his stories in the press. And we've seen over the past year, he doesn't love when the media gets onto a story that doesn't flatter him or that he doesn't want.
I think that's right. And I kind of see both sides of this. But Steve, so the tradition is that the president-elect allows press pool to travel with him. The tradition is also that major American newspapers don't openly advocate for a presidential candidate in their news pages. Yeah. So everybody has kind of departed from established protocol,
exactly
right?
I mean, look, I think that the press, particularly the New York Times, are making themselves look completely ridiculous in the last few days. Just think about the last few days. The end of last week, front page story lambasting Trump for including lobbyists in the transition team. A few days later, Pence comes in, dumps the lobbyists, and now the story is chaos and turmoil for doing exactly what they wanted him to do.
Well, exactly.
And what's really going on here, I think, is that we're seeing this, it's a long-standing love affair with Obama that the press has had, and it's based on this notion that they don't really care. And I think what we're seeing here is that the press don't really care about policy or the real-world consequences
of policy. They definitely don't care about policy.
What they care about are words and tone and how it all comes over. And of course, they've always loved Obama because he talks like an anthropology professor and comes over as convincing. And they hate Trump because he talks like a normal person, which of course in their eyes makes him sound stupid.
Right. He's the inarticulate steal. I mean, they're all liberal arts majors is kind of it. But I mean, if they're ditching the press pool at this period before the inauguration, will there be a briefing every day, do you think? What else are we going to change?
Trump has run a very unconventional campaign. He didn't release his taxes. He broke protocol with all kinds of things. I think, first of all, that gives him the confidence to break other protocol. Why not?
Sure.
He got away with it. But secondly, he is not, I think he's trying to get used to, or maybe starting to realize that he's going to have a reporter attached to his hip for the next 4 years, and that's uncomfortable for anyone. I also think his staff has to get used to the idea of informing the press about his movements and everywhere he goes to dinner and everything he's doing throughout the day. So his staff did respond to this too and say we're establishing a structure, a pool infrastructure.
But I wonder why. I mean, I'm for the press being with the president at all times because I want to know more, and I'm in the press. On the other hand, they've so discredited themselves that if you're Trump, why don't you say, I don't care what they did in past years.
Well, his reaction, I work for the Wall Street Journal, and I'm very proud of the fact that we are a watchdog. The media serves as a watchdog role. We broke really important stories this year about Obama's cash payments to Iran, about the Clinton Foundation investigation, about Trump himself. So the media plays a really important role. But to your point, they have to play the news reporters have to play a neutral role.
I think the Wall Street Journal is a watchdog, but the Washington Post is an attack dog on behalf of the Democratic Party. I mean, why would you play along with that?
I just think this whole guy, look, they're supposed to be a watchdog on serious things that matter and affect people's lives. Where he goes to dinner, I mean, frankly, who cares? I think that the point is that they've got to focus on the things that really affect people. And there's all these conventions that really make no sense and are part of the kind of pompous self-image of the media. And actually, the serious stuff that they should be doing, they've fallen down.
Well, so how about this? A perfect example, Shelby. So we've lowered interest rates to their lowest rate ever in 5,000 years. We've never had interest rates this low. That has massive effects on people, like people who save or thought it was a good idea to save. They're screwed. I've never read that story on page 1 of the New York Times. That's like a huge deal. They just don't cover that. Instead, it's like, how will Trump affect restaurant culture in Washington?
Well, everyone's been obsessed with Trump for the past year. I hate to, slam other publications.
No, but they're very shallow. No,
you can say that. I'm not going to say it. But I will say, the existence of the president, his health, his whereabouts, that can move markets. That can influence foreign policy.
Yes, that's real. I agree.
That's a huge, awesome job that they have. And the traveling press is really important. I don't think that the freak out last night was for nothing. It's for the American people. People want to know where Trump is at all times.
So we're almost at time to see if you've watched this from the beginning. What changes do you think Trump will make in the way he deals
I hope
with
he makes a lot of changes because, again, there's a real hypocrisy here. For years, we've been told by people in the media and elsewhere that people are sick of politicians.
People in the media.
That people are sick of politicians who just do talking points and spin. And we want people who are more human and more natural and more normal. And here's a candidate and now a president-elect who is just like that. And, of course, they freak out. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is so absurd.
We don't really want what we say we want. I'm paging Dr. Freud. I'm starting to believe that. It's great to see you both.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Good to be
Congrats
here.
on the show.
Well, thanks very much. Well, longtime civil rights guy Jesse Jackson weighed in on Hillary Clinton's legal troubles in a very passive-aggressive way today. Watch this.
President Obama should follow President Ford's example and offer a preemptive full pardon and inoculation against politically motivated prosecution in the spirit of healing the divisions in our country. To do otherwise will only exacerbate divisions and hardened feelings on both sides. It would be a monumental moral and political mistake to pursue the prosecution of Hillary Clinton.
So a blanket pardon would get Mrs. Clinton off the hook if she winds up facing any charges or jail time. But, of course, she denies she's done anything wrong. So to see one of her presumed allies out there saying, pardon her, might be a mixed blessing. Okay. Donald Trump, barring some miracle, will be the 45th president of the United States, but some electors are trying vigorously to make sure that miracle happens. Two of them join us straight ahead. So what's next? That's a question we plan to answer regularly on a variety of topics, but tonight it means what's next when the Electoral College officially votes for president. That happens December 19th, and that's the day on which the deal is sealed. And yet some electors believe it is possible to hand the presidency over to someone other than Donald Trump. Could this actually happen? Should it happen? Joining us now, two of those electors who are pushing for this, Brett Defy from Washington State and Michael Baca from Colorado. Gentlemen, thanks a lot for joining us. This is the kind of topic that just infuriates people watching the show. And I just want to say on the outset, I think you both are sincere. I'm not here to attack you at all. I really want to know kind of how you're thinking about this. But I got to say, Brett, to you first, we've had a lot of elections. We had a national election and then 50 primaries and caucuses, and people already told us their preference, and you're trying to undo that. So why wouldn't they be mad at you for trying that?
Well, they absolutely have had their vote. But as the Constitution was set up by our founding fathers, it designed this system where the population of the United States votes for electors, and the electors vote for the presidency.
Right.
The founding fathers, including Alexander Hamilton, really saw it as the last line of defense against an unfit president.
Right, and against the vicissitudes of the mob. No, that's absolutely right. And yet, on the other hand, Michael, people feel like, I think correctly, that they ought to have a voice in who the president is. And the truth is, when Trump assumes that office, he'll be accountable for the tens of millions of people who voted for him. Your candidate would be accountable to 270 electors. So you can see why that's inherently not very democratic, right?
Well, absolutely. And I want to say that, the next president needs to have the values that I believe represent Americans. I'm a former United States Marine. Honor, courage, and commitment are absolutely critical and ingrained to the fiber of my being. And I do not believe that Donald Trump has those values. And so I think that, like Brett mentioned, the founding fathers, this is the last line of defense. And I think that we must do all that we can to ensure that we have another Republican candidate that has better values for Americans.
Right. But I mean, there's no Republican candidate, as you know, Brett, who has the support that Trump has. And if you were to do this, you would send a really clear message to people that it's not a democracy, it's an oligarchy, a small number of people run it. And wouldn't you be thereby ensuring social chaos? I mean, democracy is a safety valve that keeps people calm, and when they think they have no control, they freak out and storm the Bastille. Isn't this reckless?
Well, when the founding fathers set this system up, they set it up specifically this way for a situation like this.
Right.
And I believe the founding fathers were geniuses and wrote one of the most amazing documents in the history of mankind. And I don't consider it a good thing to question what they put into place.
Well, I don't think they actually spoke on Trump specifically that I remember. I haven't seen the documents in a while, but I don't think he's in there.
No, he's not. But they spoke very clearly, especially Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 68. They spoke very clearly about someone getting into office who was unfit for the position. Right. And they left that up to a small number of people who could look into the issue and decide. They specifically left it up to those people, 538 at this point, and that was their plan all along. And so all we're trying to do is honor what the founding fathers gave us.
And as I said at the outset, I mean, I give you guys both credit for good intentions. I don't think you're, trying to hurt anyone in doing this. I think you're people of goodwill. But Michael, if you are sincerely concerned as a former Marine about the direction this country is about to take under Trump, why wouldn't you do the more obvious thing, which is try to convince wise people to join him in the administration and help administer this government and move it in a good direction? Isn't that a better and more obvious choice?
Well, look at the people he's surrounding himself with. We're going to have Steve Bannon, who I think is absolutely deplorable, and I do not think that is a man that we should have.
I get it. You don't like some, but why aren't you volunteering?
Tucker, I'm sorry, but we're not here to attack. We're not here to
I'm not attacking. It's a sincere
I would apologize if you let me say this. The people that he's already surrounding himself with are not good. They don't reflect the values that I believe the Americans hold. I do not believe that the Americans had.
Michael, I'm trying to be patient, but the guy's appointed like 3 people. I mean, there are 3,760 positions open.
With a leader of the alt-right movement?
There are 3 people
that
appointed. So, but what about you
so
and your friends who are
33%
decent?
of the people
Why
he's
aren't you
appointed
volunteering?
reflect the values of white nationalists, which I do not believe reflect the values of Americans.
Now, I said I took you seriously, and now I don't, because that's just stupid, and you have no supporting evidence for it. So I'm going to have to go to your colleague here. No, because you're throwing white supremacy around, and you honestly have no idea what you're talking about.
I didn't say white supremacy. You're putting words in my mouth, Tucker.
If you disagree with their views on things, state what they are, but instead you're name-calling. So I'm going to go over to your friend Brett here and ask a pretty simple question, which is, isn't the main point of this system, as designed by the founders whose wisdom you revere, rightly so, to preserve a strata of social stability upon which you can build civil society and economy and the rest? What you're proposing would really cause chaos and a lot of drama that would be hard to recover from. Do you recognize that?
Well, I certainly recognize what the Founding Fathers put into place. They put into place a release valve, in case of emergency firebox for a situation like this. And we want a conversation with all the other electors out there, and we're not going to tell them what to do. We're simply going to have a conversation about what they think is best, and hopefully they will agree with us and come together around a Hamilton candidate, such as a John Kasich or a Bloomberg.
Okay.
And
I think it'd be
people want to
Kasich,
know more about really what we're...
Okay. Well, so we're almost out of time, and now I know I cut you off, Michael, because I thought you were unfair, so I just want to give you one last shot. You were posturing about your moral fitness and the lack of moral fitness of Trump's appointees. Aren't you bound to support a specific candidate? Are you allowed to do this as an elector? I mean, fill me in here. Wouldn't you be violating an agreement you made?
We have, under our Article 2 in the Constitution, under the 12th Amendment, we have the right to choose, and we have to be able to come to around a consensus candidate, a Hamilton Republican, because there are many fine conservatives out there, and I'm actually rather excited to see what Republicans do with full control, because, you know, if their values and if what is going to happen in our country, I'm excited to see, because if they're right, well then, you know, we proved us wrong, and I'm not too stubborn to change. And I think that's what's something we're getting misguided on.
All right, gentlemen, thanks a lot for explaining yourselves.
Everybody should look. Everybody should look at HamiltonElectors.com.
I tried to get on it today, and I couldn't. You need a new web designer. But anyway, gentlemen, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. All right. Here's something new and ominous. Prescription painkillers now top tobacco among Americans. More people use opiates than use cigarettes or chewing tobacco. That's from the latest national survey on drug use and health, and it reveals that about 38% of adults have used prescription pain relievers in the last year, while just 31% used tobacco. The study found that tobacco use is declining. Painkiller use, meanwhile, continues to skyrocket across this nation at a disturbing rate, though it's rarely mentioned in elite circles somehow. The opioid crisis is so bad in Tennessee, for example, that there are more opioid prescriptions than people living in the state, according to the Tennessean newspaper. And yet somehow, recreational OxyContin use is still more socially acceptable in many places than cigarette smoking. Quite a trade-off. Well, New York values apparently mean choking strangers on the subway who disagree with your politics. Our old friend Brian Kilmeade, one of the wisest men in television, here next to explain what happened to New York liberals. While some liberals are cowering in their safe spaces reading the New Yorker editorials, some are lashing out in anger. Here in New York City, one Trump supporter says he was attacked on the subway just for wearing a Trump hat. Watch this.
Says, oh great, another white Trump supporter. Next thing I know, I have hands around my neck, I'm being choked, then another gentleman comes over, he shoves me up against the wall, up against the window. Now I got my arm pinned behind my back, I have the one guy choking me.
Do you fear you should take off your hat?
Absolutely not. This hat will be on for the next 8 years.
Well, that's hardly an isolated incident. Similar reports have emerged from Berkeley to Madison and beyond. Joining us now for some in-house counsel, our old friend Brian Kilmeade. He works here in the building. He's the host, of course, of Fox and Friends. His book, Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates, is #1 right now in paperback, which is just amazing and ridiculous.
Well, speaking about #1, congratulations on this incredible launch.
You.
Yeah, the show looks great. I cannot believe you're in 2 locations. Where do you get the budget? What kind of budget?
It's ridiculous. It's really without limits. Here we're in the Fox and Friends studio right now. It shows you the budget.
It's incredible.
So you're a lifelong New Yorker.
Yeah.
When I think of New York liberals, I think of Woody Allen sitting in Elaine's debating missile defense. The New York liberals of today, choking people on the subway, they've changed.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's no doubt about it. There's some very courageous people who just want to make a living walking in New York City over the last 3 weeks because no one ever really thought Trump would win.
Yeah.
Who are wondering, should I even tell anybody that I'm for Donald Trump? This guy in particular is Corey Catalano, typical person who would vote for Donald Trump, a blue-collar guy. He's an electrician. Not only was he attacked on the number 5 train, he never thought it was going to happen. He's in New York. He doesn't expect to be attacked and, going home after a day of work. But he gets slammed into the wall to the point he said he's got a bad shoulder, still working through the pain. And he said that he's also walked up to vendors on the street just to buy a coffee. And they said, you're a Trump supporter? With that hat on, I'm not serving you. That didn't happen when Romney lost or when Bush won. There's something unbelievable about this. And Tucker, if you don't mind me coming to a conclusion on it, do you have some time?
Yes, I do.
Here's my conclusion. $100 million worth of attack ads who made Donald Trump a cartoon character. An angry bigot who does this. He didn't help things, I give you that. But because they tried to vilify him and he vilified back, that built up to hate to the point where the loser was going to be angry. But the fact that it's Hillary and Trump is the survivor and he's still in New York City has put people over the top.
But see what I'm so struck by, I think it's totally right. But when we were kids, and we were a kid in New York, liberals would always tell us how much they cared about the little guy, the average person. Now here the little guy and the average person, the electrician in this case, is wearing the Trump hat, and the elites hate him for that. So when did they lose sympathy for normal people?
Simple. The Republicans went and took it. And I remember Rick Santorum rolled out a book, and he said about 3 years ago, and he said Republicans used to be the blue collar for the blue collar guy as well, and they lost it. They left it. And because Donald Trump grabbed it as a billionaire, which is bizarre, as a billionaire, he related to it. He walked away with Pennsylvania. He walked away with Ohio. He walked away with Wisconsin. He walked away with Michigan. Now he's got to go do something for those people. But in the meantime, the people that thought they won and controlled America find themselves right now in the loser's corner, and they're not taking it too well. And that's why Corey paid the price. That's why this 11th grader in California at Woodside High School paid the price. She got beat up because she posted on her Instagram, I hope Donald Trump wins. On Wednesday, she gets beat up in the playground. That didn't happen when McCain lost.
The people who thought they ran America wound up in the loser's corner. I'm going to quote you on that. Now, let me just say quickly, you were honestly, and it's not flattery, one of the only people in New York City I knew who called this. I saw you on election night, and you'd bet money on it, I think. You knew when others didn't. Why did you know when no one else did?
Well, all I said is this. I'm not an expert or pollster, but if all these states are within the margin of error, why wouldn't you go with the person with momentum? The pollsters are telling you we're within the margin of we don't know.
Yes.
So why can't Trump do it? And no one could say, well, they just said you can't win 9 of those I don't know states. In the end, he won 9 of those I don't know states because he surged at the end. And then we find out later he did have a sophisticated ground game and a great digital guy. And he was actually much more sophisticated than we actually knew. Now let's see if he can do the hard part, running the country for 4 years.
That's exactly right. How do you do with the sports book?
What do you mean?
I mean, gambling. When you gamble on sports, how do you do?
The addiction's over, and I think I've effectively beaten it through a series of classes, and I got to meet a lot of people. No addiction, but I did. John Finley, an esteemed executive here, owes me a lunch, and I've chosen Del Frisco's, which I can usually not even put a down payment on a steak. So this is going to be a great lunch for me.
Get the surf and turf. He's rich. Number 1 on the paperback list. Brian, it's great to see you.
Congratulations, Tucker. You so deserve it.
Thank you.
And feel free to use the couch in the back where Fox and Friends normally is.
You got to clean it.
Coming up next, cooking.
Coming up next, actually, Ainsley Earhart.
Oh, my
Fox and Friends. One of my favorite people in the world.
I thought I was.
Trust me, you do not want to miss her or her new book. Stay tuned. I think in every office there's one person whom everybody loves. One person who's not a mixed blessing,
Tucker.
but just a blessing. And here at Fox, that person is Ainsley Earhart. You can ask any producer, any anchor, you can ask any makeup artist or lighting guy or cameraman. She's the best. Her book, new one, Take Heart, My Child, A Mother's Dream, is number 1 right now on all books on Amazon and obviously number 1 on children's books. And she joins us live. That's just amazing. Tell me how did that happen?
Okay, so I went into...
How'd you do that?
I called my agent and I said, I really feel like I'm supposed to be writing this children's book. All these signs that I was supposed to write this book. I wrote a book about my dog. And I read it to the agents, and my agents, and they were like, we really like that. Let's pitch it to some of the publishers. So they did, and Simon & Schuster said, we want to meet her. So bring her in, we watch her on Fox. So I come in and I meet with them, and they're like, all right, tell us about yourself. And I said, well, you know, grew up in just a normal family in South Carolina. My parents are the best. My dad was a coach. Mom went to school early to teach all these amazing kids. She's an amazing person. But Dad was in charge of breakfast. And every day, every morning, he would leave a little note or a little scripture or a little saying next to our cereal bowls. And I was like, you know, I remember Walt Disney, I hope I'll never be afraid to fail. Attitude determines aptitude. Don't expect to soar with the don't stay up with the owls. Don't expect to soar with the eagles. Nothing good happens after midnight. And they loved all these. That's my favorite. So they loved all these, and they're like, "That's your book, Ainsley. Write this." Then they were like, "Do you ever get to share your faith?" Because I said my faith is extremely important. Do you ever get to share your faith on Fox News? I was like, "Yeah, they've never told me I can and can't say anything." I said, so the other day I was on the 5 and we were talking about ISIS, we're talking about this election, and I said, there's a scripture that I love. Take heart, my child. I have overcome the world. So God's in control. We're going to be okay. And so they were like, that's the title of the book. I'm like, how did this happen? How did Ainsley Earhart write a book? I'm like, this is, I mean, I have to give credit where credit's due, and that is to those ladies, my agents, Fox News Channel for allowing me to do this and talk about this, you for having me on, everyone for having me on, supporting me, and to God. I mean,
have they ever heard anything like this in a pitch meeting at Simon & Schuster?
I don't know. I mean, I love these ladies. We fell in love. They're like my best friends.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was great, and they let me tell my story.
I should just say to our viewers, if you haven't seen Ainsley in the morning, she's the most sincere person ever. There's no agenda other than... What is there to be upset about? Okay, we have the best viewers ever. We live in this great country. We have the freedoms to write a book. My dreams have come true. I had a healthy baby girl this year. I got my dream job. I get to work with you. I'm holding a book that has my name on it. I mean, what is to be upset about? It's awesome.
You know?
So tell me about the book. I mean, who were you thinking about as you wrote it?
So as I wrote it, I mean, it's all the lessons my parents taught us, and combined in like a lyrical way. It's not exactly like, I hope I'll never be afraid to fail. I could read you a little excerpt or whatever, but it's it's a message I wanted to pass on to my daughter. I was pregnant, writing this book. I mean, I'm like boo-hooing when I got the book in the mail for the first time from the folks across the street at Simon & Schuster, and they mailed me this, and I go into my daughter's nursery. I didn't know if I was having a boy or a girl. I sit in her chair in her bedroom. This was like a few weeks before she was born, and I'm just reading this. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for all these many blessings. But it says, before you were born, before you came to be, I dreamed a love song on a butterfly sea. The waters that day whispered truths in my ears of hope for you, love, for your life through the years. May your feet trace new patterns on warm sandy shores. May you dive into waves and yearn to explore. But if you get lost in the ocean's vast tides, take heart, my child. I'll be by your side. And Amen. That's for you, sweet Hayden.
Ainsley Earhart.
I mean, the illustrator. There's the book. The illustrator. This is her first book, Tucker. I mean, I've got my notes that are falling out.
You are the best.
Look at that! Isn't that amazing? Her name's Jamie Kim. She's from North Carolina. She's one of my peeps. She's from the Carolinas.
Thank you, Ainsley.
Thank you. Oh, and 10% goes to Folds of Honor.
Of course it does. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. You're the best. Tucker, congratulations,
Thank
by
you,
the way.
Ainsley. We asked if you were king for a day, what would you do with your power, your absolute power? Pouring in. Time is running out. We'll read some of them next. Everything. What would you do to improve Americans? Some of the responses are unbelievable. Very smart. First up, have a zapping dog collar on Tucker and every guest who talks or yells over each other. Good one. Beth tweeted, I would like to take back all the participation trophies that have been handed out in the past decade and melt them in a fire of fury. Roy wrote, sell California, use the money to pay off the national debt. Jason wrote, easy, require all public schools to serve bacon, good for the mind, body, and spirit. And finally, Brad said, give up my absolute power because that's not how it's supposed to work. Tomorrow, we start Today in Pomposity. Want to hear from you. What's the most pompous thing you've heard today? Send it to us at Tucker Carlson. That's it.